beautiful. She was the most beautiful thing in my life. How did such an ugly creature create such beauty? Our spirits will live on together now, Sarah, and we will watch over our children and our children's children. We will walk in beauty together.
Molly takes her last breath. Scene ends. It is 1972 in the Bangor Library. A loud clap of thunder shakes the room.
Wow, what a dream. I feel like I really saw Molly and talked to her. I felt what she was feeling. It was so real.
Mary rubs her eyes and sees a mirror exactly the one Molly was holding. She picks it up. It is where the book was.
Oh no, where's the book?
Lightning flashes and lights up the room. The flash reveals a portrait across the room. She runs to it, still holding the mirror.
Oh my God, it's the daughter. There's an inscription. Sarah Molasses, daughter of Molly Molasses, donated by the Bangor Tartine Club.
Mary puts the mirror down and looks up at the portrait.
I can't believe this. She looks just like my mother. Molly, I know you can hear me. I know now your spirit and the spirit of my mother are with me always. Thank you for teaching me about my Native heritage and for telling me about my Native ancestors and their legacy. I won't stop reading about them until I've read every book in this library. I know I won't stop learning about them ever. Molly, Mom, this day started out being one of the saddest days of my life. On my 21st birthday. I'm so thankful for the lessons I've been taught today. Molly taught me that I cannot let an abusive, violent act define me. Now I know that I have both African and Native blood in my veins. I learned in school about Bessie Coleman. She was the first African American and Native American pilot. Bessie was famous in her day. Black and brown? Wow. Those ancestors are all amazing people. I am proud to be both black and brown. I am filled with pride to have such a heritage of vigorous, strong, and enduring people. I am proud to be both. And now I know my ancestors are with me. They are protecting me. This fills me with such pride and gives me strength. I will fight for equality and justice for all my people. Thank you for a forever birthday gift.
Blackout, end of play. Folks, we'll take a 3-minute break and then we'll have a post-show discussion. I invite all of you to stay if you can. Thank you. Call in all you dancers and start driving them. Call in all you dancers. Here we go. First one's a sneak up. So here we go with our post-show discussion.
Thank you all so much. That was brilliant and gorgeous. So everyone is very graciously willing to participate in a discussion. And because we are taping this for everyone's benefit in the future, what we would like to ask is that anyone who wants to pose a question, would you please speak into this microphone? We'll pass it around. And that way your question will get on the tape. And then they have microphones here, so they'll just have to use their acting voices. Okay, and yeah, so would anyone like to start? Are there other questions or comments?
Thank you. That was really wonderful and dramatic. I have a question for Donna. How did you go from sort of nonfiction writing and your other work over to fictional drama?
That was Bill's fault. I had started another book, but then I heard about Bill and actually took a sort of I went to a class and I observed it, the playwriting, and he was good enough to allow me to be part of the playwriting class and sort of like monitor it. And so I was writing a book at the time, and I just took those characters and turned it into a play. That play is called Gusgabe, Creation and the Venetian Basket, which we are working on. This is going to surprise you. We're working on it to be a ballet. And we're seriously talking with the Portland Ballet Company. So yeah, it was that sort of transition where I saw how stories could be dramatized live on stage, and I really, I always liked stage. Always liked to have. I like the theater. So this was just piqued my interest, and I just went ahead and wrote something, and Bill said, "That's not too bad." So he helped me, and
It's really interesting to make that transition. That's a big jump.
it was tough because I ended up writing a lot of stuff, and they'd say, "Well, don't write that. We can act that."
Yeah.
So that was the hardest part.
In the beginning, the mother said something about the blue laws or the blue book laws, and I must plead total ignorance. I wonder if you'd say something about that.
Yep. As Title 22, main chapter, Title 22, it were these laws pertaining to everything that the tribe did. It governed everything, is education, election of council, that sort of thing. Everything was in law, the state law. And that was all created by the state legislature, and it was all contained in a little blue book. And that's why we called it the Blue Book laws.
You were talking about what was going on in Bangor at the time in the 50s that made it easier or safer or something to be black, and not to take away from what you said about the Indians, but I was surprised by that piece, that Bangor was a bastion of whatever in the 50s.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because Bangor had a pretty large black community in the early 50s, 50, 51. I think after that they started to disperse and move, but the Dow Air Force Base was there at the time. So there was a lot of African-American soldiers and whatever in that community. And I became interested in that piece because of my good friend Rachel Talbot Ross. Her father did a black history of, I believe it's Maine. And there's another lady, Eldridge. She did
Elgerton Lee?
yes, Black History of Bangor. So I researched both of those books. And it's amazing the number of black communities and people. I don't know, they weren't very large, but in Bangor they were, but they were all over the state at that time. And before that, and now mostly in the Portland and Lewiston area. So there is a huge history of the black community in Maine.
interested by your choice of including so powerfully a dead character, and how that often features in contemporary Native American fiction. And I'm wondering if you've been thinking about that, about what it is that the dead can do in literature that makes them especially useful for certain kinds of stories and certain kinds of dealing with certain kinds of issues.
Well, they're ancestors. They're not dead. They live. They speak to me in the morning. Yeah, they're not dead. And you know, and part of our culture is honoring those ancestors and the way they lived. And so it's not a big stretch for me to write about them. And Bunny, you want to say something about that? I mean, Bunny has done a lot of work in the Native communities for years. And she did quite a bit of research on Molly. And it's really tough to find anything on Molly Molasses. And I have to say, I have to hand it to Bunny for doing a lot of the research.
Yeah, and to me, what was interesting about your characters and the fact that this young woman didn't know about the notables that Molly Molasses informed her about. And I, as an anthropologist, as a researcher, writer, I understand in large part why it was very hard to track down the information. It takes an obsession almost, and a real dedication. And I remember being in the Bangor Library and you know, hunting for things about Molly and coming across in this archives, in this back little room, there was a folder and it said Molly Molasses. And I opened it and there were two things in there. The poem that Barker wrote about her, about Molly selling her calling card on the streets of Bangor to get money. And there was a photo of her, and it was not one of the famous photographs of her in the peaked cap or the top hat. It was a photo of her about this big in a house dress. Just this part of her body. And honestly, I just sat there with that photo and held it because it was not her show face. And so it felt incredibly intimate.
Also, I want to say a couple words about the choice of Molly. I should tell you who I am. I'm Margot Lukens. I teach Native Lit at UMaine. The grandmother is a very important character in Penobscot storytelling. And it's the grandmother who gives the wisdom to Gluskabe, who's the one who makes the world the way it is that human beings live in. And so in some ways, Molly in this play is a reenactment of that grandmother, and there's a repeated grandmother pattern. Granddaughters raised by grandmothers, even within your play, which you know, makes a lot of sense in terms of traditional Penobscot storytelling.
One of the things I observed was the shift in the vernacular from the historic scene of Molly interacting to the dream sequence of dream presence. And I guess my question is, as you know, a writer, how did you come to make that choice? Was it a stylistic choice? Did you know, was it based in some sort of historical sense of wanting to ground that real-time historic scene differently? Was it for the contrast? I'd just like to know more about that decision, because I'm hoping someday I might write a play.
Well, you know, where's the portrait behind me? When you see that portrait, and you see the photos of that time, the 1800s, and when I was going through the Black history books, there were pictures of the old general store in this Main Street in Bangor. And I just kind of visualized this, and visualized her, and reading Bunny's book, her in this general store. just looking through stuff. I could see it, and then I thought, that'd be a great scene for people to actually see. And so I just took that and put it in the play, because I just wanted people to see that scene in the store, because I thought that was important. And the issues around back in the 1800s and whatever. So it's like going from, in 72, it doesn't go to present, it goes to 72, that's the latest,
Yeah,
because she's 21.
it's contemporary though.
Kind of. I mean, but time-wise, I wanted to make it for today, but I couldn't make it work. So it had to be 72. So I just did it because I thought it'd be very interesting visually.
Well, I really thought that the change in the speech patterns, so that contrast was an effective piece overall of it.
Yeah, because back then, English wasn't spoken that well. It's not like, you'll hear people when they write, they'll say, well, don't put this emphasis on broken English because it's not good, people. But to be realistic, I felt that I had to do that. And I have to say that Michelle did a good job.
Thank you.
I just want to say I loved that aspect of what you did there too. And I found myself thinking that if Molly, were speaking to us in 1972, I mean, at that point, her people's primary language had become English, and she would have had a greater fluency in it. And it just gave me also just the sense of changing time. I liked that a lot.
Hi. In your play, you mentioned children being taken away from their families and being sent to boarding schools and all that horrible stuff that happened. In Australia, in recent history, that exact same horrible stuff has happened. And part of the work of the libraries and archives sector is to work with community services to try and reconnect all the families that are referred to as part of the stolen generation. Is there a similar thing here, or?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
It's really good.
It's the TRC.
The Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Yeah.
Yeah, and they've done a lot of really good work all across the state in informing people about that situation. They have ongoing training programs for people who are interested in talking about that and filling in the community in general on that issue. They do really well.
You mentioned the portrait was given by the Tarotine Society. And I know I used to live near Belfast. I used to have the Tarotine Society of the Red Men or something. Could you tell me what that is?
No. No, the Tarotine, I don't know about the society, but the Tarotine Club back then was a club for wealthy men.
Okay.
And they just got together and they did their business there and over drinks and cigars, and they discussed stuff. So there was a Tarotine, that still exists in Bangor. It's a Tarotine Club in Bangor now, but they're open to the public and they have weddings and receptions and dinners and stuff like that. Yeah.
But there was a tradition of men's clubs in the late 19th and early 20th century in New England towns, mostly Boston has the Algonquian Club, Bangor's Tarotine Club is along the lines of that, and it's sort of like, a wealthy man's version of the Benevolent Protective Order of Elks. But it connects them to the place in a kind of foundational way. It's one of those, colonizer moves that usurps the place of the actual indigenous people.
But I do want to mention that the Tarotine Club, of course, was exclusive to white wealthy men. So the black community in Bangor created their own club called the Tarragon Club. They went to that.
Why not? There were Redmond societies all across the United States in the 19th century, so what you found in your area, and then, yeah, and it was called the something like the Divine Order of the Red Men, and it was white men who would choose the name of a Native American tribe, and they had all kinds of paraphernalia. And if you read their rules, it's really funny. There's a whole list of rules of what you must be to be a member, and the last one is must be Caucasian.
Oh, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah.
Do you have any papers on that, like research on that? There's a hall in Yarmouth that used to be called Redmond Hall, and I could not find any documentation
I can send you some.
about that.
If I could just quickly mention too, a plug for Philip Deloria's book called Playing Indian.
Yes.
Talks about that historical phenomenon, just
Good.
in case people want to look.
Well, I was just going to say, it begs the question of why the portrait was done in the first place. It's sort of co-opting of, you know, the most beautiful Native woman in her costume, and saying, well, that we own that. I'm answering my own question. Why was that portrait so important for them to have?
Is that rhetorical? Well, I think you just said it. You know, it showed ownership, that they could do anything they wanted. They had a picture of this beautiful young Indian woman in the Tarratine Club, and you know, she was like captured.
Yep. Which, if I could just say, some of my former students are in this classroom who had a class on captivity narratives with me, but I just find that incredibly powerful, since the genre of the captivity narrative in American literature is dominated by stories about Euro-Americans being taken captive by Native people, when in fact, right, this is an example of the exact opposite, which is in fact much more prevalent historically. So it's a great question, Kelly.
Yeah, there's a good book called Firsting and Lasting by Jean O'Brien. She's an Ojibwe scholar, and it's all about how New England towns create their own histories about what's first here. It's the first house, and it's the first house of a white settler, right? Or first colonizer house, and very often it includes portraits of the last of the Native people, and so the portrait of Sarah, who actually in fact was dead, would have perhaps fit in that category, but then no mention of her daughter and the bloodline that continues, her actual descendants.
Thank you for putting this together. It's really, it touches on so many different aspects of our realities, as Native people, and the legacy of colonialism. So it's really brilliantly, orchestrated in terms of the characters and the issues. I have one comment and a question. So my comment is, I particularly found when she came out and said that we can't allow this to define us, was a very profound, point in the play. And I wonder, anyone can reply to this, but I often think, okay, then how is this, what does this have to do with today? Like, what does this have to do with, we know Native women are 7 to 10 times more likely to be targets of violence, but this is the past, this is documenting the past, and how does this connect? And how can we make sense of how this connects?
Does anyone want to answer that? Well, okay. It connects because we are still being treated the same. Nothing has changed. In fact, I think it's even gotten worse when you look at the numbers of the murdered and missing women in Canada. They're being investigated, they're being counted. In the United States, same things happening, but they're not being investigated and they're not being counted. So the connection is, it's still happening, and nothing has changed.
I don't have anything to add to Donna, but I was just going to say how we never talk about this stuff in the general public, or very little. So yes, we definitely have to connect it to now and what's going on now, but people still have so much denial. I just think history is so important. It's just, how do you know where you're going if you don't know where you've come from? And I think a play like this makes it a lot more real to people, especially non-Indigenous people. I've lived in Maine for 12 years, and I remember near the time when I first came, I met white people that didn't even know the names of the Wabanaki tribes, and they'd lived here all their life, and their parents and grandparents maybe. So to me, it's really important to see where we've come from. And yes, I mean, I can't add to Donna, just the stuff that's continuing. So it's not new, you know, it's not new at all.
One of the amazing things that I didn't like history at all when I was growing up until I began working with Micmacs in Aroostook County, who had been excluded from the Maine Indian settlement in 1980. And I, through a series of circumstances, ended up working with them. And one of the tasks that fell to me was to gather the oral histories of the elders, who were primarily women. And those have never been published. They were done for the Aroostook Band of Micmacs. But as I was gathering these stories, I discovered, because basically I was trying to reach back as far in time as I could with people who were the oldest people in the 80s. And if they could remember their grandparents, I could get them back, you know, family history back to the late 1800s. And then I was working with my husband, who was marching forward from the 1600s, and we met with the longer story. And history came alive for me through that effort. And what I discovered is that history provides a platform. It's a safe place where you can talk about things that are toxic, that are frightening, that people are so sensitive about today. And just as what's happening with Donna's play, I think this is the real power and potential of it. You step back in time, you see those issues, you know, and then Rebecca asks a question, and then Donna says, hey, we're still dealing with it. And then you translate from history to today, Native Americans and African Americans, and then you say, and then there's all these other groups. It just becomes a way to make the journey together.
I want to comment about the state of theater. It's hard to do Donna's play because if I were to put myself in the role of producer, the question now would be what theater would produce it? Who would actually have the courage to present it? When I was at the Institute of American Indian Arts, we did a total of 10 student plays. Some of the plays dealt with native language. And after the students completed the plays, I realized there's no venue for them. There's no venue to get them produced. Right now, Rihanna Yazzie, with her new Native Theater Festival, just made a commitment from Yale to produce plays that were developed in the Yale Indigenous Playwriting Festival, and they're going to produce them. And then Native theater didn't really take off until Joseph Papp did the great experiment at the Public Theater. But we've always been searching for a venue. But as far as this type of material, there are a lot, you know, people don't even consider the idea of the transgender community in Native communities. And yet there are Native playwrights that are producing this type of work that can't get a venue. Why? Because it's too upsetting. It's too confrontational. One of the things that has always amazed me, and it goes back to what George Wolfe said when he did A Colored Museum, it's hard for America to confront its own crimes. And that's the most important thing, because I used to do lectures at various universities, and I would tell students, I'm not here to get you angry, I'm not here to make you feel guilty, I just want you to listen. And that's what happens in theater, because in theater, you can have that, basically, exchange. But you need theaters who have the courage to do it. I got into theater because it was the most peaceful means to bring about change for my people. That's the reason why I do theater. I can bring out information about the native condition without confrontation, because I've had members of my family who were members of AIM, who were part of the Wounded Knee Takeover. And I look at them and they're gone now. And they were fighting for that expression. So again, theater has that potential. But right now, what's happening with theater, all art in America is through the capitalistic system. If it doesn't have a monetary value, it has no value.
You just made a really powerful connection there with Wounded Knee, the second Wounded Knee, because activism, a lot of people are arguing now, is current street theater. There's a lot of creativity being poured into the right venues for making changes, not making anyone rich, not making anyone a living. These have to change, of course, but people need creative outlets for political change to happen, and I think that's your motivation as a playwright, as if I'm understanding this. You don't want us to leave complacent today, right?
Leave however you want to leave. You know? But I do want to just say, I know you want to say something, Bill, but there's a cast behind me here, and they play these characters. So if you have questions for them, it might be good.
Do you want them?
Mr. Webster? What's your first name?
Tyler.
Tyler. I was just wondering what that was like for you to play this really, I wanted to call you evil, but you were, I don't know.
Evil.
Okay, all right. You knew him better than I. You did a good job, but and that's how I know that I care about a story or a play. Is like, you don't have to like the characters, but you have to know who they are and why they are. And I wondered if you wanted to tell a little bit more about your story, or if you know what it was. Were you considered a good guy by your peeps?
From what I understand of this character, I mean, it certainly doesn't seem to me like a good guy. There wasn't much I could find about the character or the character he was based on. Coming into this as a white man, never having faced the kind of hardships and being cast aside as these people have, I mean, this is certainly a very powerful show for me, which I think is why this show is very important, for people to see this and realize, you know, this wasn't something that happened in the past in some distant place. This happened in Bangor. This happened in your hometown, your backyard, and it's still going on. I've kind of trailed off your question now, but I mean,
Just kind of, were you considered a good guy? I mean, what did it feel like to be that character?
it was hard. I mean, for me to you know, call Michelle's character squaw was, you know, I grew up knowing that was a no-no word, and that's, I mean, it's a very emotional.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Old Town. I grew up right next door to Penobscot Nation.
And it was a no-no? I'm surprised.
Oh, yeah.
So he knew it was a no-no,
Right.
but he was growing up.
And
He had to be
you
wearing
know, going to school
Young enough.
in Old Town
Okay.
and having a lot of
Okay, sorry.
children from Penobscot Nation going to my school, there was very little in the history classes about Penobscot Nation. Very, very little. We had maybe one class regarding the history, and that's a lot of our history.
Yeah. Yeah. So you learned something through this.
Absolutely, Absolutely.
Well, the other thing about Joseph Webster is that he's not a particularly unusual criminal, evil, twisted. He's normal. And that's what's so shocking and deeply horrifying.
I think he kind of stood out as the villain in this play, as he was, but, I mean, there were hundreds, thousands more like him.
Yeah.
He didn't stand out in that respect, but.
Yeah. And it almost reminded me a little bit of what was happening on plantations generations ago, where you had the slave owners.
Where you had the slave owners preying on the women on the plantation, and that was pretty accepted as far as I can tell, right?
It was the norm back then,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah. That makes me just want to ask all of you what it was like, and I'll just slip this in. Do you have any plans to do this anywhere else in the state? Because I've already heard from people that have said, oh, I can't make it that day, but when is it? Is it going to be, down east? Is it going to be?
About 4 hours, I think.
Sure, you're right. Yeah, right. Okay, so those two things. Right.
Would everybody maybe be willing to just go along the line and share to follow up on the question?
For me, it was powerful playing this role, not only as someone who is Native and African American, but also as a woman. I have a 21-year-old daughter who goes to UMaine. They just had a rape on campus last week. I say on campus, but it was in one of the adjacent apartment complexes that the university owns. And it happened to be 2 buildings over from where my daughter lives. So playing Molly, it's empowering, because as poor and as broken and as downtrodden as she was, remember it's 1867, she had no voice. She had no presence. She was nobody. She wasn't a person. But she still had enough power inside of her, love of her people, of her daughter, that she confronts, Mr. Webster, touches him, which was a no-no, but at that point she doesn't care. So when Bill approached me and Donna, it was a moment of, I get to be a superhero. Molly Molasses was a superhero. She refused to let who she was in society define her. She basically told him to, stick it where the sun don't shine. This is who I am, and this is my daughter. You don't get to take what doesn't belong to you. Flash forward, like you were discussing earlier, it's the 21st century. It's still being taken without permission. It doesn't matter. If you're a woman, if you're a man, if you're Native, if you're African American, it doesn't matter who you are. This is something that needs to be translated. And if it needs to be talked about through Native theater, about how our women are being abused, and it needs to stop. The persecution of people needs to stop. The name calling needs to stop. To me, this play is more poignant than ever, considering our climate. And Donna's words need to be told. So, that's me. Sorry.
Okay, I really enjoyed doing this play. It's a very personal play to me, and I'm still feeling like the after effects of this play and how personal it is to me, because, like Mary in this play, I am also biracial. I am half white on my mom's side and half black on my dad's side. And growing up, of course, I knew my parents were of different skin tones, and yet it never occurred to me how important it was. But I remember when I was 7 years old, that as young as that, I started to question what I was. I had this picture book, The Life of Martin Luther King Jr., in watercolor pictures and easy to read words, and every night I would read it. And I just felt so inspired by how brave that man was in standing up for what he believed in, despite being arrested and costing his own life in the end. But as I saw the people in those pictures, there were some people who were white, like my mom, and people who were black, like my dad. And I would look myself in the mirror. I was in the in-between. And I felt confusion, and I was wondering what I was. Am I black? Am I white? Am I both? Do I have to choose? And the question bothered me so bad that I went to my mom and I asked, Mom, am I black or am I white? And her simple answer was, you're both. And with that simple answer, I take to heart for the rest of my life. And still to this day, I'm still trying to, I know who I am, but the thing is, I grew up in Maine, and it's mostly white, along with New Hampshire and Vermont. And I've had a lot of exposure to the white side of my family, and I got to know my German side, and my grandmother was a great help. But unfortunately, I did not grow up around a lot of colored people, except for my dad and my brother. And only when I got to the University of Maine do I really got to get more exposure of more colored people. And in a sense, when I hanged out around them, I almost felt more at home in a way. Like I've always had with my mom's side, but I felt a greater sense of who I was. And I feel like one of the major points of this play is accepting who you are, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Sorry I used that Western reference, but sometimes in life you have to accept all of you. I would get mad if anybody was like, you have to be one race or the other if you're both. And I'm like, if I deny one part of myself, if I deny a race, then I would be denying a part of myself. And sometimes in life, you have to accept there are good things about where you've come from and some that are bad. Like Mary, she felt pride and happiness with her Native ancestors, but also felt disgusted with what happened to Sarah. I guess the end of the day is be proud of who you are.
You're Sierra.
I'm Sierra.
That's right. I'm Connor. Being adopted and growing up in Bangor and kind of being both. It's like being both. Like having it's like having the heritage from a white family because you don't have the black family, but your skin's still African American. It's this show. It kind of gave me hope in a way. Like, I mean, I still wonder like what my birth family's like, what those other families are like what it would have been like to be growing up with them. But it's not a bad thing. It's just a curiosity thing, I think. This show brings a lot of light to a lot of issues that I still see going on in my schools and things like that and growing up. And it's a really interesting way the way, I'm trying to say it the right way. Give me a second. The soul searching in the show, it's relatable. It's more relatable to me than a lot of people will understand, I guess. So this show really does touch me, and I'm really proud to be putting it on and getting the message out there.
Hey guys, I'm Rose. Coming into the show and getting the script and reading through the part that I had and not knowing that all of this stuff went down was pretty upsetting. Like the fact that I wasn't taught any of it, like the Blue Book laws, wasn't taught about any of those. I wasn't taught about the Native American children being taken from their families and not being able to speak it in schools was very upsetting to me. Like I couldn't imagine like having my child taken away from me and being in that role and seeing the struggle of picking a heritage that a child should have because of the damage that the other heritage or both at the same time could do to that poor child was so upsetting. Like, when Molly and Charles are talking about only telling her about her Black heritage and having her grow up not knowing about it, it's just something that you don't think about until like you see it in front of you, and then you're like, why wasn't I shown this before? Like, I'm so honored to be in the show and like learning so much from it. I've been in another Native American show with Mr. Yellow Robe before, and I learned even more from that, and it's just such an eye-opener, I guess, and something I definitely want to keep looking into and stuff.
Oh, I've spoken.
We have about 9-10 minutes until 2, if anyone has any more questions.
Just to let you all know, there are 2 exhibits upstairs under the heading of Native Voices, Native Concepts of Health and Illness, one of which comes from the National Library of Medicine and the American Library Association, and one of which is made at the Abbey Museum by George Neptune, about health in Maine Native communities and those concepts. So if you have time, check it out.
Over here.
I just have a question. Given that we're here at the University of New England and it's predominantly medical school, correct? Right. Health sciences. So I wonder, and it's exceptional that the school has taken on Donna Loring's collection and has an annual lecture. But it seems, and what I've heard really clearly in the course of the discussion and what's come out in the play is how, hidden this is. Bill talks about how it's difficult to even get an audience for a play like this. So we know that, it's these issues. It's like these issues are hidden, from society in general. I mean, we even know, like, with the Dakota Access Pipeline, that wasn't even covered by the media, right? So I continue to wonder, particularly when I'm on university campuses that rest on Indigenous territory, like, what do you think is being done here on this campus to, in more structural, sustainable ways, to uncover these truths? Is there something happening here beyond the programming that we're not aware of? And if not, are there faculty here or students that can speak to what needs to happen? I don't know.
Just jump in and put yeah, I think it was a question. Yeah.
I don't want to be the spokesperson for that because I'm only one person, but I'll say not enough.
May I?
It's a huge question.
Really important. Oh, bam! Sorry. Take that.
I was injured before.
You know, I'm going to use my actor's voice. I can't speak for UNE or any institution. All I can speak for is myself. I'm a professor of philosophy, and I do teach Indigenous life in one of the classes. I teach philosophy and pop culture. And what I find when I talk to students is a lot of what you're saying. Oh, I wasn't aware of this. I didn't know about it. And I'm not originally from Maine. I'm from Wisconsin. Yes, I'm a cheesehead. But I grew up in Maine. My dad's sitting in the back. And for me, what I tell my students whenever they bring up questions like this, oh, I don't know what can, what needs to be done, I'm like, you're the person who needs to make the change. If I can make a change, with one thing, you can. You can learn about this. Pick up a book. Paper, I don't care if it's digital, pick up a book and learn about the people you live with. Learn about another culture. Everybody talks about, oh, travel, you need to travel, see different places. You have it here in this state. There are places to go in this state. All you have to do is walk up to somebody and say, hi, my name's Michelle, I live here, blah, 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 blah. And I find that if, at least with my students, if I get them to ask a question about Indigenous life, about Native playwriting, about whatever, African American playwriting, Asian playwriting, whatever we're discussing, I find that it opens the door. I'll say to them, look, if I want sarcasm, I'll go home and talk to my children. Give me an honest question. If you're honest with me about my culture, I'll be honest with you with an answer. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Oh, is there rape? Yes, there's raping that happens. You know how you stop it? You talk about it. But nobody wants to talk about the problems that we have. So, at least for me, I find that what's happening right now, discussion helps.
I'm not from here, but from the University of Maine. And so when I heard your question, and the fact there was no response, my first response was, damn. That's sad. You mentioned the Dakota Access Pipeline. My one-act play was performed there this summer, and I received no money for it because it was for community at the Dakota Access Pipeline. They did my play Sneaky there, and it was such an honor for that to happen. At the University of Maine, Margot and I have been trying to get things going several times. We did Woodbones, a play of mine this fall semester. It was the first time ever that a Native play was ever produced at the University of Maine since Veteran Indians that Margot and I produced in 2004. This is what the problem is. You do it one time and you think it's enough. You do it once and you think it's going to settle all this. It's going to heal all this. It's like when Malcolm X was talking about Jackie Robinson being in the major leagues. You get one from the field, and that resolves all the issues. And it's sad, again, too, because teaching in these courses at the University of Maine, not a lot of students can name the tribes of the Wabanaki Confederacy. That's the reason why I always state I'm honored to be here, because this is not my homeland. I am Native, but I'm not from these people. And there's a difference. And you must learn this too, because you have to broaden your perspective. Thank you.
My questions are obvious.
Oh my God.
But I just think that given the health disparities that Indigenous populations face nationwide, not just in Maine, there's an even more, there's an urgency to address this in the one medical school that we have in the state of Maine. And it needs to be done in a compulsory way, because although I agree with what Michelle's saying, that people can claim their own education, we don't know what we don't know.
True.
Students aren't going to know what they don't know. So it has to be introduced. And universities are the place at which, truth is reconciled and addressed and knowledge is mobilized, and where knowledge is validated and created and intergenerationally passed on. So in many ways, universities can be that hub of truth mobilization, right, and reconciliation. But it's not going to happen if people don't know what they don't know. So I think that given distinctly the health disparities, like we know that Aboriginal women, Native women, are 7 to 10 times more likely to be targets of violence. Our people have the lowest life expectancy, the highest poverty rates. So given the disproportionate health disparity, this is a place that making sense of, well, why is it that Aboriginal women today are facing the highest rates of rape, violence, poverty, unemployment? And in a health context, there's a distinct responsibility for a university like this to take it up in a compulsory manner. So my question is wholly rhetorical, and I think it's something that, certainly more plays like this need to be, put out into the campus as a program, but something more sustainable needs to happen. And it's great that this is happening, that the collection is here, but hopefully, larger things happen and people mobilize and organize, politically on this campus to ensure that the truth is uncovered, because this is where it happens, I think, are universities.
Yes. But I would like to say that this is Dr. Rebecca Sockbasin. She's my niece.
Can he get that? Okay.
Yeah,
Question?
go.
We have time probably for the one more.
I
know.
First off, thank you, Donna, for bringing this to us and for everyone for participating. It's great to have you. My question, I was interested in the discussion of your future work or the work in progress with Portland Ballet, possibly, and then why that choice, and also will you keep spoken word, which I think is, obviously can relay information in a very powerful way, as you did today. Is that going to be part of it? If that
Well,
goes that
it's in the process. I'm hoping that will happen, that we'll keep some of the spoken word. There's something like 11 songs, and there's music with that Bob Barr is working on. He's a former director of the Bangor Symphony. Also worked with the Tennessee Ballet, so he's working with me. And Michael Greer from the Portland Ballet, we're going to be meeting on this shortly, and figuring out what we're going to do for the story and how the ballet is going to work. So that's about all I can say right now.
And why ballet?
Why ballet?
Yeah.
Because I watched an interview with Amy Copeland, very mystical, wonderful African-American ballet dancer. And also seen some of the ballet that they had at Portland Stage. And I was thinking, that is one fantastic art form. Why should that just be claimed by white society? Misty Copeland said, ballet is the bastion of white supremacy. And it is. So why not make headways into that?
Thank you so much. There's one more announcement that we want to make, but I just wanted to, on behalf of the university, thank everybody for coming. Each and every question was incredibly valuable, and the performance was gorgeous. And I just wanted to remark on how much I appreciate the ways in which your writing and your creative work is furthering the same goals that you were advancing in politics, but that you're able to use all of these different forms, and I really appreciate that. So thank you, everybody. There's one more announcement germane to our discussion about an event that's happening here tonight.
Tonight at 5:30, up in the exhibit, it is two Native women who, one of whom is an MD at Maine Med, a resident in psychiatry. Annabelle Bradford going to be speaking and presenting on some Native issues in health. And one is UNE's own pre-med student, Samantha Shepard, who has some ideas about interprofessional team treatment and in relation to cultural perspectives of treating Native people. So it's few and far between, but there is something happening tonight. Wow.
And it's at 5:30
5:30.
in the gallery space upstairs. And there will be audience discussion afterwards.
And it's Facebook live stream.
Oh, fabulous.
If everything goes okay.
And what's the Facebook?
So thank you.
Facebook.com/une.edu. It'll be on the UNE Facebook page.
All right, thank you again so much, and Donna.
Thank you.